Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this conference, both you that are here in Gamle Festsal at the University of Oslo, and those of you that are watching. We are delighted to invite you to the first ever Norwegian conference on One Health. And I would like to first acknowledge the organizing committee members, which is University of Oslo Center for Global Health, of which I, Jeanette Magnus, am the proud director. In addition, we have the Norwegian Veterinary Institute, the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, and the Norwegian University of Life Science. And we invited all other Norwegian universities to participate in the scientific committee, and those that answered our call, in addition to the universities, was University of Southeastern Norway, Center for Digital Life, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim, the University of Agder, Oslo Metropolitan University, and Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø. In addition, we have Bondelaget as a partner, and we have Food Safety on Himalaya as another partner for this event. And in order to properly invite you to this magnificent hall, I have the pleasure of asking Rector Svein Stølen to give the opening remark. Please, Rector.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a great pleasure to be here, and welcome to University of Oslo. Welcome to the old festival hall. Before the parliament was built further down the road somewhere here, this was where they assembled. So this is a historic building, so it's an important part also of the history of University of Oslo. Welcome also to more than 100 participants that takes part digitally to this conference. This is, as Jeanette told you, the first national conference assembling the Norwegian-based expertise in One Health. The aim is to draw a picture of the activity in Norway and then also frame the way forward towards a One Health Norway platform. This is an important meeting, taking place at the same time as another important meeting, and then we are across the North Sea in Glasgow. Delegates from all over the world meet at the COP26, the COP26, to discuss and hopefully also reach an agreement on concrete measures to mitigate the climate crisis. An important topic, but this here today is as well extremely important. The climate crisis is a part of the Sustainable Development Agenda, climate as such. But that's only one of 17 different Sustainable Development Goals. The 16 others should also be approached, although climate crisis is apparent here now and we are in a hurry. Looking into the whole Sustainable Development Agenda, you have the backdrop, I guess, also for this conference. And it's fitting to remind everyone that the Center for Global Health is an initiative from the Faculty of Medicine and a part of the way University of Oslo is going to meet the Sustainable Development Agenda. It's extremely important. We need to consider the SDGs in everything we do. That is true for the institutions, that's true for society at large, but it's also true for each and every one of us. And many of the challenges we are facing require efforts from the whole global community. The 2030 Agenda says it will be for all of us to ensure that the journey to sustainable development is successful. We had a visit from Al Gore here a couple of years ago, and he framed this even more simple. He said, all hands on deck. That was his requirement to University of Oslo and to society as such. So finding sustainable solutions to global health problems is a part of this, and it is urgent in an increasingly globalized and unequal world. And you have an extensive program here today with telling examples of the scale of this task. You are delving into topics like infectious diseases at the interface between animal, humans, and the environment, sustainable and secure food production, climate change and biodiversity loss, and how this leads to challenges to the global health. And what we heard also on all people taking part, all institutions taking part here, I think you already started very well on your way forward, really reflecting also on the goal number 17 on the Sustainable Development Agenda, partnerships for sustainability. I think that to work together in new and more efficient ways is absolutely necessary. One of the efforts that we are pursuing at the University of Oslo at the moment is to build the new life science building at Blindern. Construction that is taking part now, where we try to work in a new way. We are going to assemble in that building together with Oslo University Hospital, work in a more intertwined, intermingled way, and I think that is absolutely necessary also outside the building in the future to build down the silos between different disciplines, build down the silos between university and other sectors. So for us, this is about securing convergence between fields of science, but also across societal sectors. So I would like to thank the organizers here today, again, the Center for Global Health at the University of Oslo, Norwegian Veterinary Institute, the Norwegian Institute for Public Health, and the Norwegian University for Life Science for organizing this, and in that way also doing what we are asked to do in goal number 17, partnerships for sustainability. You have a very exciting program, and I wish you best of luck, and please enjoy the meeting. I'm very happy that this takes place here at the University of Oslo and in this very festive hall. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director. This was the first handshake. That was great, at least for me, after the pandemic. So thank you very much, and have a joyous day. I anticipate that you're so busy that you don't have time to stay. So thank you very much. Then, without further ado, we will move forward in our program. And I am delighted to introduce to you the chair of this conference, who will give the first presentation. Dr. Carlos Das Neves is a wildlife veterinarian with a focus on infectious diseases, sustainability, and the One Health approach. He has served as president of the Wildlife Disease Association and chairs the wildlife specialty of the European College of Zoological Medicine. Carlos Das Neves is the director of research and internationalization at the Norwegian Veterinary Institute and holds a joint appointment as professor at the University of Tromsø. He is also a member of the IUCN Species Specialist Commission and a commissioner with the Lancet One Health Commission. So please, Professor Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jeanette, and good morning, everyone. Nice to see so many of you here, and hopefully as many or even more online. The title is perhaps very pompous, but my goal here is actually just to warm you up. You had coffee, now let's make sure the coffee activates so that you're ready for much more interesting things than I have to say. But let's jump off that. But then I try to say welcome to the World One Health Day. It happens to be exactly Corona Day 600. Just out of coincidence. And just as of coincidence, as the rector mentioned, while we are here, I'm sure that Jonas would also love to be here. He had to go to COP. He has moved now to Copenhagen. But who thought that 650 days ago, these guys would be in Glasgow talking about One Health? Because they are. So this in itself illustrates that things are changing. And who would have thought that just as another example, the G20 health ministers spent 2 days discussing how One Health can be implemented. For those of us following One Health, this was way out of our minds 650 days ago. But it's happening. And they seem to be serious about it. And let me stress, seem to be serious about it. And this involves a lot of people. And it involves including some of our finest, and now that even though they are retired from their jobs, We've had the Norwegian Prime Minister on a One Health Biodiversity Conference. We've had the European Union engaging in promoting One Health approaches. Everyone seems to be in tune with what most of us have been trying to lobby for some years. So there is a momentum for this topic. And then it's time to say welcome to One Health. And just like the years can be counted BC and AD, so can One Health live history. And it's just a little different what this means. It means before Corona and after doom. And One Health has perhaps these two live moments. And I say after doom because for many of us here in Europe, this medieval Bruegel picture was something we thought was medieval. But that quote written 700 years ago depicting what was happening in Italy in 1347 is actually not so very far from what we have experienced today. So a sense of doom has indeed taken us all back again. We thought that these pictures that you see there could happen perhaps in Africa or in Southeast Asia, but not downtown Venice or Madrid as it has happened. So there is indeed a feeling that things need to change, especially because we are a global world. I wrote globalization in the title of this presentation. And by globalization, I mean that in the world we live, no matter if you want to call it a Chinese virus or a Mexican bacteria or a Malaysian parasite, it's quickly a Norwegian problem. Things have speeded up. The world has speeded up a little. And to illustrate that, I'm sorry, I like to show a lot of pictures, but I think pictures are nicer than that you just listen to me. Yersinia pestis took 14 years to come all the way from Southeast Asia to Europe. Actually, then only in 3 years it spread to Europe. We were a small global village then. 14 years. Corona has taken 4 months. And one can be a little ironic and wonder, because the Norwegian society in 4 weeks thought that we were done with it. And as we enter this week, we start to realize that perhaps we're not yet done with it. But things have speeded up. And that is something we need to take as we move along. So let me reflect with you some things that I think are happening around the world. Natural resources are being used. We need them, whether it is food, whether it is energy, we need them. They're being used. They're being used quicker than we can replenish them. They are not being used sustainably. There's just a picture that looks very exotic for us here in Norway, but for each of these points I want to bring it home. This is also use of natural resources. This is Norwegian waters. This is happening now. Let me draw another picture. Land use has been associated to immersion of diseases, destruction of forests, and all problems associated to that. This is happening now. And while it's easy to think about tropical forests being destroyed to get palm oil produced, this is also land use, and it's not in Malaysia. We hear that species are disappearing from the planet quicker than ever before. It's a normal evolutionary process. Some appear, some disappear. We've all seen in the United Nations the dinosaur last week. For those of you that follow it, it's a normal thing, but it's happening quicker than ever before. And once again, we're not talking about exotic animals in the savannah or coral reefs alone. We are talking of something that is happening also in the Norwegian ecosystems. Animal species are disappearing. And this also influences biodiversity, diseases, and so on. Let me take you to another very discussed example that the director just brought up. Climate change is here. Unless you're an absolute Republican fanatic, I think we all agree that this is true. And while I put this sentence from the International IPBES report that 50% of all mammal species in Africa might disappear, and that is, it's a problem, once again, climate change is happening also here. And many of you will remember this picture from Kerstin Landberger in Svalbard some years ago. So once again, it's not an exotic problem. And of course, we are all made aware that these guys in Glasgow are sitting because these reports made it a very clear image that this is happening. It's happening now. It's happening everywhere. It's not localized events, and in many areas we're reaching past the point of no return. So there is a sense of urgency that climate, diseases, human health are all interconnected. I could, of course, not stop speaking about Corona, and with COVID, a lot of people have been spending a lot of time, discussing who to blame. A Chinese lab lady or one of these guys in the picture. And I will agree that when you handle, I'm a wildlife researcher, when you handle with wildlife, this crocodile laying dead in the floor of a wet market can be the door for an infectious disease, a pandemic. That's true. But in the exact same body posture, this gentleman, if he's laying on top of a box filled with birds with avian influenza, is opening the same door. So let's be a little careful when we track down the wildlife species, or the Chinese researchers for that matter, and decide on who is guilty for what. And I had to illustrate, I was actually just in Africa with a colleague of mine actually this weekend, how we handle and how we behave is important. I managed to get this, I was very happy. I took a picture of a lion. I saw a lion there. I went there to Nairobi and I got to see a lion. What you don't see in the picture is that behind that lion is 12 4x4 vehicles filled with over 50 people. So I suppose the lion is wondering, what's wrong with you guys? And when 50 are around the lion, you shouldn't be really surprised that something the lion can give you, or even worse, as we've seen in the US, that you can actually infect the lion with something, which is what happened with the coronavirus at the Bronx Zoo. So the way we behave makes a difference. So this brings us to One Health, which is why you're all here. And you're all One Health aficionados, so I don't need to tell you what One Health is. But as the day goes along today, we're going to be playing with these very famous 3 circles. This is the most used, abused, misused Venn diagram in the planet, I think. Everyone has decided to try to design it in a different way. And today we will also do that exercise. And the first session is, of course, pathogens circulate among these 3 compartments. Bacteria, AMR, these things are happening. And we will look into this Venn diagram where pathogens interact between the compartments in our first session on infectious diseases. But let me draw another Venn diagram for you. If you look at this picture from the Stockholm Resilience Center, this shows how food systems happen. There is a food production at the biosphere that is essential to ensure that society gets provided basic needs, good health and don't starve and no poverty. And this in itself fuels economy, and this is what we call the food systems nexus. Now, we can try to get these 3 little pie charts and put them in our famous Venn diagram. And I would argue that this as well, biosphere, economy, and society, is One Health. So we will look into this in the food systems session, which is One Health. Let me draw again the same Venn diagram once more. I could also say that this diagram, instead of animals, humans, and the environment, could be scientific knowledge, political leadership, and society awareness. And let me be a little ironic and illustrate that. Because what happens when political leaders, like here in Brazil, don't trust science? What happens when there seems to be political leadership absence and researchers get, to test herd immunity at country level? And what happens when actually the people in the streets don't believe any of these guys and burn COVID tests like here in Amsterdam? If these 3 circles don't talk to each other, we have a problem. This is also One Health, and it's governance. And we'll try to look to it as we enter session 3. And last but not least, of course, is biodiversity. And here I just take a quote from a large report that basically tells you what we are doing, humans, is destroying the biodiversity, is making the climate change worse, and it fuels pandemics. And this is the link between biodiversity and the things that we are observing. And this, too, is One Health. So these are 4 sessions, 4 ways of drawing these beautiful circles, and they will, at the end, I think, show us that no matter which circle you want to be in, we do share an ecosystem, we all need food, we share interventions. And these 3 wheels, they need to work together. And for them to work together, we need scientists, we need people, we need politicians, we need the private sector. If that big wheel actually will roll towards 2030. And there are many people that are starting to doubt that if this is rolling quickly enough to reach 2030 as we all envision. So this is what brings us here today. And I don't want to disclose what you're going to hear, but I also want to make then some final remarks about what One Health should not be. One Health should not be just AMR. But people, we have managed to get One Health to work for AMR. And here in Norway, we managed to get it to work pretty good. Is this an example we should copy-paste to other areas? One Health is not just something that is needed in low and medium countries. Many of us in developed countries have been helping a lot of countries to develop their own national One Health plans. Rwanda has one, Nigeria has one, Uganda has one. We don't. The US don't, the UK doesn't, England, Germany doesn't. So it's not just down there. Misconception number 3, One Health is not just about what happens on the land. And in the oceans, One Health is extremely relevant. Microplastics could be one good example of how things are changing that affect our health, our economy, our access to food. One Health is not just about infectious diseases, humans and animals. It will be a lot of the focus here today as well. But you know, what happens to the microbiome and to non-communicable diseases is One Health. And this picture of a coffee plant being destroyed by a fungus that changes and spreads with climate change is One Health. One Health is something that Norway can do outside its borders. And here I am lobbying a little for my own gang. And you see here examples of some of our researchers a little all around the world, sharing Norwegian knowledge in different countries, but also absorbing from those countries' experiences which are relevant for us at home. And my last example, of course, One Health is not just about scientists, even though I presume most of you here today are scientists. One Health is about politics, it's about people, and it's about money. And in this picture, you see just from a publication last year on Science that it might cost up to $21 billion to prevent pandemics better. It's a lot of money. We've lost 16 to 17 trillion. Suddenly, it's not a lot of money. And I suppose that's why these guys have finally activated themselves. Money sometimes does speak louder. So this too is One Health. And it's your job to share the knowledge, because I like to make fun. The only thing that circulates more around than coronavirus particles, for example, is coronavirus experts. They mutate quicker than the virus. And it's a challenge when they mutate wrong. So sharing the information is essential. And it's really good when we all speak one voice. And then my last words I give to someone that seems to have learned as well that One Health is important. And if she talks, perhaps more will listen. And I'll leave you with that One Health statement.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, access to food is a human right, and sustainable food systems are vital for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
I know that the voters have already silenced her, but we could get her to speak one last time. Perhaps. We tested it, it was working.
Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
I would like to say thank you very much. That's my second handshake for today.
Yeah, we're all corona safe.
We need the videos to work, because now we're also having.
Yeah, we have a video presentation now.
So I'll go back. Yeah. I'll wait for Ingeborg to hear what's happening. But while we're waiting, I will introduce the person we're going to watch, not Erna Solberg, but also another colleague of ours that is sending us a message from Germany, and I will introduce her while we're waiting. Okay? That is Andrea Winkler. She is a co-chair of the Lancet One Health Commission, and a professor at the University of Oslo. And she's the co-director of the Center for Global Health at the Technical University in Munich in Germany, and the founding deputy director of the Center for Global Health at the University of Oslo, where she is a professor. And together with Dr. Amuasi from Ghana, she is the co-chair of the Lancet One Health Commission. And what will we get now? Will we get Erna Solberg, or will we get the video from Andrea? The sound is working? Okay. So will we get back? Will we get... Just a second.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, access to food is a human right, and sustainable food systems are vital for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Norway recently presented a white paper on the steps we will take to reach the SDGs by 2030. We will commit to doing more. We will promote food safety as part of One Health. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. The One Health approach, connecting human, plants and animal health, must be at the top of the global agenda. So, now let's roll up our sleeves. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, and many thanks for inviting me to the first Norwegian One Health conference. My name is Andrea Winkler, and I give this presentation on behalf of the Lancet One Health Commission, of which I'm the co-chair, together with Dr. Amuasi from Kumasi in Ghana. To start off, I will introduce the Lancet One Health Commission. The aims of the Lancet One Health Commission have actually been changed throughout the process. We have started just before the pandemic, and the launch was in May 2019. Now we have our first cohesive draft and actually working on the second draft. Our aims are the evidence synthesis of the value of One Health, and we focus on infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, and antimicrobial resistance, also taking into consideration important cross-cutting issues such as community aspects, health systems, as well as equity. We then have a use case on food systems where we apply a One Health approach, which is health at the human, animal, and environmental interface. Then in the second part of the Commission report, we define One Health principles and apply those principles for One Health operationalization, for which we launch recommendations at the end of the report. The launch of the report was already published in a small piece in the Lancet, and will hopefully be published next year as a full report. So this is the Lancet One Health Commissions with members and concrete faces. I've already mentioned that we are two co-chairs. So here you can see Dr. John Amuasi from the Kumasi Center for Collaborative Research in Tropical Medicine at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. And I am the other co-chair. I have a placement, professorship for One Health and at the University of Oslo, and I'm also one of the deputy directors of the Center for Global Health. At the same time, I'm co-joint director of the Center for Global Health at the Technical University of Munich in Germany. The commission is hosted foremost by the Center for Global Health at the University of Oslo, with support from the Center for Global Health at the Technical University of Munich and the Global Health Group at KCCR on the Knust campus in Ghana. The commission comprises the expertise of 27 commissioners and 6 selected scientists from around the globe. So first of all, I will start with definitions and concepts and the systems approach that we think is critical to a One Health approach, which is the interconnectedness and the interdependence of human, animals, and the environment. So here I've just quoted 2 definitions. They are quite different, and there are other definitions and more to come. For example, the One Health high-level panel that has recently been created by WHO, FAO, OIE, and UNEP has yet another definition, and they will launch the definition very soon. So our definition from the Lancet One Health Commission is One Health represents an integrated approach to advancing multi-species health at the human-animal-environment interface. But there are other definitions from, for example, Jakob Sinstag, who is a very knowledgeable One Health professor and has actually been a One Health pioneer for many decades. He says One Health is any added value in terms of health of humans and animals, financial savings or environmental services achievable by the cooperation of human and veterinary medicine when compared with the 2 medicines working alone. So there's more focus on human and veterinary medicine. And to complicate things further, there are other concepts that are very close to One Health. And I quite like this scheme that was published in 2020 that tries to bring together various concepts such as planetary health, but also ecosystem health or eco-health. And they have used 2 axes. One is here the y-axis that goes from traditional concepts to novel concepts, and then the x-axis goes from anthropocentric approaches to non-anthropocentric approaches. And then the concept is placed with reference to either being traditional or novel, or either being very anthropocentric, meaning the human animal is at the core, or being less anthropocentric, with humans not being all that important and animals having the same position at the core of One Health, together with their shared environment. So when we look for One Health, we can see that One Health is here pretty much in the middle, going more and more towards the right side, so going more towards the non-anthropocentric part of the model. And in that, it is actually quite different from planetary health, which is rather anthropocentric, so humans and the planet, and planet health with reference to human health. Although there are many shades of gray and also several definitions of planetary health. Hence, some people also think that we should not have firm definitions, but just focus on the movement and on the output, which is human, animal, and environmental health viewed together for better, healthier outcomes for all of us and our planet. I'm now moving to our first aim, which is the evidence synthesis around infectious diseases, non-communicable diseases, and antimicrobial resistance with regards to the human-animal and environmental interface. So first of all, infectious diseases. So again, we look at the connection of humans, companion animals, wildlife, but also agriculture, land use, biodiversity. All of that is important when we talk about infectious disease from a One Health perspective. And of course, in this day and age, many will think about epidemics and pandemics when hearing about One Health and infectious diseases. And indeed, this is of course a focus of our work. So we look at epidemics and pandemics, be it Ebola or of course the current pandemic, but we also look at endemic diseases, neglected zoonotic diseases, and even non-zoonotic diseases. Then we look at antimicrobial resistance, always with a firm One Health approach. So we look at the human system, the environment, livestock, and also aquaculture, and what effect introduction and overuse of antibiotics has for all of these systems. We also come up with a quite novel result that spillovers of resistant genes may not be that frequent as thought, and we'll discuss that within the One Health context. We are also proud to have a paragraph on non-communicable diseases. When talking about One Health, people usually think about infectious diseases and antimicrobial resistance, or surveillance for infectious diseases and antimicrobial resistance. However, non-communicable diseases have a quite pronounced One Health perspective, and this is shown here in the slide at the top right corner, where we see the 5x5 agenda launched by the WHO that includes 5 diseases and 5 risk factors. So we have on the risk factor side air pollution, unhealthy diets, tobacco use, physical inactivity, harmful use of alcohol, and one or several of those risk factors will lead to cardiovascular disease, cancers, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and not the least, mental health conditions. So the environment, of course, plays a quite prominent role in the treatment and management of non-communicable diseases, but also animals in various ways as companions, but also comparatively to derive new knowledge about non-communicable diseases that could also benefit humans. And Professor Nettesen-Horowitz will, I think after me, give us some more insight on that fascinating aspect of non-communicable diseases. Before I move to the implementation part of our Lancet One Health Commission report, I shall also mention that in addition to diseases, we have also looked at shared interventions and how best to measure the added value of such shared interventions. And then, as said before, we transition in the report to a case study on food systems. And from that, then move to our last part, which is the operationalization of One Health. To start with, we define guiding principles, including equity and egalitarianism, holism and systems thinking, stewardship for One Health, and interdisciplinarity and or transdisciplinarity. This is just to mention some of the guiding principles. The politics around One Health has actually become very important. And since the pandemic started, One Health has been politicized. Here, for example, on the right side, you can see the German foreign minister calling for a One Health approach. At the same time, or just before, the Berlin Principles on One Health were launched that call for a set of core actions on how best to implement One Health within various local and global actions. And apart from governance and political systems, economics, and also investment, financial investment in One Health is extremely important. To that end, we have been invited to write a policy brief on a potential pandemic treaty that will be negotiated by the WHO very soon at the end of November. And here we lay out how important One Health governance is, and also the consideration of economics, finances, but also, and that is something that is also quite prominent in the Lancet One Health Commission, is sharing of One Health knowledge in unconventional ways, starting from school-age children or even before, moving to vocational training and post-training. So a non-stop learning process in terms of One Health. I will just show you a couple of key political events that are important for One Health implementation. Since a couple of months, we have a One Health high-level expert council that has been launched by 4 UN agencies, WHO, OIE, FAO, and UNEP. And that has a vision, but also aims, and very interesting. Here you can read the aims. I'm not reading them out to you, but they will be very close to science and actually even advice on research, on a One Health research agenda. And that is not usual for councils or for expert bodies within the WHO. So this also shows us that international organizations appreciate science and want to be very close to science. And in fact, the Lancet One Health Commission has already made contact and will start to collaborate with a One Health high-level expert council. And then all the different activities and meetings that are happening at the moment, starting from the G7 in the summer, where UK actually has placed the G7 summit quite firmly on One Health ground, but quite disappointingly, within the report that was launched, One Health was just mentioned once, and that was in the context of a pandemic prevention. At the moment, so this is of course hot off the press, the G20 summit has started in Italy, and there have been pre-meetings, and not the least around finances. So here in that global deal for pandemic age, which deals with the report of the G20 high-level independent panel on financing the global health commons and the pandemic preparedness and response, One Health has actually been mentioned over 30 times, which is a very good sign. But then looking at the WHO Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence that was just launched in Berlin, and where One Health is very often mentioned. In the strategic paper of that hub, in fact, One Health has only been mentioned once. So in a nutshell, One Health is on the agenda in politics, and we need to find good governance around One Health, not the least to make it trickle down to the local level, and also to make sure that One Health remains a part of the major decisions that will be made now in the near future, not the least within health and climate change in the upcoming COP21. So this is just to conclude. In a nutshell, we will have a strong emphasis on One Health implementation with recommendations that we will then draw from the evidence, and we will focus on One Health governance with a firm systems approach, considering our One Health principles, but also deliberating on economics and finances and how to finance One Health, and conclude with One Health knowledge and knowledge sharing. And this last slide is just really to thank the fantastic people on that commission. So all the commissioners that you can see in the middle here, but foremost the core people, which is Christina Brooks and Ingeborg Harvardsson, and of course my co-chair, Dr. John Amwesi. And then we have been able also to include very knowledgeable scientists one by one, and they are shown at the bottom here, and also a very warm thank you to this group. And thanks to the conference for having me. I wish you a fruitful conference on One Health, and I'm looking forward to the second Norwegian One Health conference next year. Bye-bye, take care.
Then I would like to leave you with the next moderator. And Dr. Hanna Jørgensen is a veterinarian with a long track record on food bacteriology, zoonotic diseases, and control of infectious diseases, working at the Norwegian Veterinary Institute. She also has a keen interest in international work and is particularly interested in finding practical solutions for laboratory diagnostics and disease surveillance in low-income setting. She is the Norwegian Veterinary Institute's zoonosis expert and One Health strategic coordinator, and she holds a joint appointment with the International Livestock Research Institute and is currently placed in Nairobi, Kenya. So please, Dr. Hanna.
Thank you. So we're a bit out of time, so I'm going to speed things up and talk really quickly, and I hope my speakers will do the same. So this session's on infectious diseases, and One Health evolved as a reaction to challenges with infectious diseases, and particularly zoonotic diseases. And although it is way more than infectious diseases, or One Health is more than infectious diseases, zoonosis and infectious diseases remain central in the topic. So estimates tell us that 2/3 of infectious diseases originated from wild animals, and apparently there are around 200, probably more, zoonotic diseases. And pandemic viruses generally have an animal origin. Now in this narrative, we forget that biologically we too are an animal species, sharing our habitat with other animal species. It's only natural that we are sharing infections with our friends. So the question is how to limit the problem. And complex matters should be approached from different angles. And One Health calls for increased transdisciplinary collaborations. Therefore, our daily work on infectious diseases should prepare us for situations where shit hits the fan, like the pandemic. So I'm really happy, therefore, that we gathered here to share our perspectives on infectious diseases and to get to know each other and to get to know what we're doing. This can improve our future responses to infections. Now, I'd like to introduce Ernst, Kristian, Rødland, and Frode, Forland. They're going to do a dialogue on infectious diseases in One Health. Kristian is a specialist in infectious diseases and AMR in particular, One Health, planetary health, and global health enthusiast. And Frode is a specialist in public health and general practice, and he's an associate professor of the University of Tromsø. He's part of the pandemic leadership at the NIPH and has special responsibility for local and global preparedness and response. Thank you.
Does this work? You can hear me? Yes, it works. Okay. We're a little bit behind schedule, as you understand, so we will be as efficient as we usually are. We thought that we should break up this line of PowerPoint presentations by just having a small talk between us. To introduce the topic of infectious diseases and One Health. And I will start just by being a little bit personal. I studied medicine in Oslo in the 90s, and I remember very well that we were told about the Hippocratic Oath. Do no harm and treat the ill with the best of your ability. That is the most important principles. But what we were not taught is that Hippocrates, he also stated in his book, Air, Land, and Air, Water, and Places, it's called. It was released more than 2,500 years ago. That human health depends upon the environment. And many claim that this is the first time it was stated and documented that human health is interconnected with animal health and the surroundings and the environmental health. So this is actually what is the basis of One Health. Just give me a second. So then, after I finished school, finished medical school, I continued to my specialization for internal medicine and infectious diseases here in Oslo also, mostly. And for the last 15 years, I have basically been only working with microbes and the way microorganisms influence and the impact they have on human health. I'm almost embarrassed to say I never heard about One Health in those years. It was first when I started as a postdoc at the Center for Global Health in 2018 I was introduced to the concept. But frankly, I have to say, I think none of my colleagues in the hospitals or in the medical community in Norway had heard about One Health either. I was having a lecture for more than 70 medical doctors a couple of years back. And I asked them, the first thing I did, I asked them, how many of you have heard about One Health? 0. None of them. This is only a couple of years back, before COVID-19. Infectious diseases and One Health. The classical example are zoonosis. Infections that jump from animal species to human species and vice versa. And as a matter of fact, 70% approximately of all emerging infectious diseases are zoonosis. They originate in animal populations. And the medical history has many examples of this. If you ask a youngster in Norway, a kid in Norway, if they know about 1349, surprisingly many do that. And the reason is a book that is called A Ship Arrived in Bergen in 1349. I can see many of you nodding. And this was how Black Death came to Norway, the Great Plague. Maybe it actually was already present in Oslo at the moment, but it said that it arrived in Bergen in 1349 with a ship from Europe. And this is the first big killer, most likely the biggest pandemic in human history, and it has profoundly affected European history thereafter. And then we can go to more recent times, and we go back to 1918. And in 1918, it was the mother of all pandemics, the Spanish flu, which was caused by influenza A, which is a zoonotic virus. Then further on in 1970s, Ebola emerged. Then in the beginning of the 80s, HIV. Then in more recent times, we have had numerous outbreaks of viral infections originating from bats and other animals, such as SARS, MERS, Nipah, Hendra. There are numerous examples, and also infections spread by mosquitoes, such as Zika, you remember, from South America 6-7 years ago. And also, we have swine flu from 2009. We have the big Ebola outbreak in 2014. And now, of course, in the last 1.5 years, we have the COVID-19 pandemic. We will come back to that a little bit, I think. Also, I have to mention AMR. It has been mentioned earlier today, but AMR is the example per excellence of the importance of One Health thinking in infectious diseases. Antimicrobial resistance originating in animal population or the environment and how it is spread to humans potentially is a very important topic, very hot topic in research and in infectious diseases at the moment. Frode, you have been working at the Public Health Institute since 2013. You're a medical doctor, I'm a medical doctor. I just sort of hinted that it was sort of ignored, the One Health importance in the medical community in Norway for many years. But can you tell us a little bit, what is the relevance and importance of One Health at the Public Health Institute in Norway?
Thank you. And since you're starting so far back in history, it also challenged me to go a little bit back in history. And I think the One Health concept has been in the awareness of public health physicians in Norway as long as they have been there. When we go back to 1860, we have the first Norwegian Public Health Act, Sunnhetsloven, which actually was operating until 1994. It was the act that I was introduced to as a medical student and worked with as a public health physician in Nissedal municipality in Telemark. And it was also describing how you should include the police and other sectors of society when you dealt with health issues. And environmental health, then when the municipal health law came in, environmental health was an important chapter, which is now taken into the new public health law, where you have to, as a public health physician of the Norwegian municipality, know about all causes that can lead to disease: environmental, biological, physical, chemical, and mental. So I think there is a lot of this One Health concept that has been there and also has been stuck in the minds of the old, what they call combi doctors in Norway. Those both were dealing with patients and were dealing with the environment, like my introduction to medicine was. I was looking after the mink farms, I was looking after the water supply, I was looking after the camping sites, if there were any bugs or any insects or whatever. So there is a kind of history here that is without using the word One Health, but has also been a kind of understanding of the interaction between the environment especially, and also the animals and the human health. And then when it comes to the Public Health Institute, you probably know also that the Public Health Institute was previously called the Serum Institute in Norway. And it's placed a little bit outside the center of Oslo, because all the horses were grazing there, where they were actually drawing the serum for the vaccine production. And that's actually the case of half of the public health institutes of Europe. They are a bit outside the center of the cities, and then the other institutes, they are in the harbor cities. Those were the ones actually established because of the tropical diseases. So these are the institutes of Amsterdam, of Antwerp, of Hamburg, of Liverpool, of London, schools of tropical medicine. So there has been an understanding of some of these, I think, things related to also environment and diseases. And at our institute today, we have had a special section for diseases connected to water, food, and animals. We have a specific thing in the Norwegian Institute, a pest department, which is also very much linked to understanding vector-borne diseases and so on, and how to eradicate them without also making damage to the houses or the people living in the houses. And then there is, of course, I think, a great understanding also in the way we are dealing now with infectious diseases generally, that most of them, as you say, are linked to zoonotic origin. And how we can deal with them has really to do with preparedness. And when it comes to the preparedness issue, I think also it's not only One Health, it's the whole of society preparedness. And I think that has been very much shown in the way this government that just resigned have been dealing with the pandemic. It's not only been the food and the health and the environment minister, it's been all the ministers of the government who have taken part in understanding how can we prevent and prepare and deal with a pandemic. And that also makes me think of how this has been dealt with globally, with the tripartite system being there, including also the UNEP. And for the future, I think even a broader concept maybe in the UN that has to deal with how can we prevent and prepare ourselves for a future pandemic. So I think it's kind of integrated, even though the word One Health has not been very much integrated in any, I think, medical students, or even at our institute, there is nothing called a One Health unit.
I would say that one thing that characterizes the Public Health Institute is multidisciplinarity, which is very interesting. It's a lot of different disciplines working together, and this is also in the core of One Health, that people come together across disciplines, working together, as has been mentioned earlier today as well. But we are touching into this COVID-19 situation, and it seems like most likely the frequency of outbreaks is increasing. We have more and more outbreaks that come with shorter and shorter distance of time in between. The reason for that has also been touched upon. It's human exploitation, deforestation, human exploitation of natural resources, deforestation, etc. So then it makes me think, should we try to focus these days on adaptation or mitigation, and preparedness is a part of that? Because in many ways you can say that to only focus on preparation, to be prepared for the unknown health emergencies. But should we also at the Public Health Institute in a larger degree go and try or try to focus our work on mitigating, trying to do, what can we do so that we avoid these things to happen? Do you have a comment on that?
I think that's a very big question and a task not only for a public health institute. This is into politics. And Virchow, you know, the old guy, he was saying public health is nothing but politics. And politics is nothing but public health. So I think this has really to do with the way you can actually work with society. And I think then the One Health meeting of today is, of course, in Glasgow. And I think we've just also now set up a new division at our institute called the Division for Climate and Environment. So it's actually trying to understand that this will be the future. It was only called the Environmental Health Unit before. But now it's also including climate. And probably the most probable damage in the future might come from climate disasters and things growing out of that. So I think fully that we need also to understand and take stock of our background as veterinarians, as physicians, understanding how to care for life. That means also how to care for every living species, because they interact with us in different ways, through the food, through the way we deal with them, and also through the intrusion of their territories, as you mentioned.
Like the pictures of the hyttelandsby that Carlos showed earlier, yes. Yes, I think we shorten it down now. So we spent 15 minutes. I think we will carry on. Thank you very much for your time coming here.
Thank you. So we'll save the questions for afterwards. I'll introduce the next speaker, who's going to talk about Hunt One Health, a metagenomic repository promoting One Health studies. And it's my colleague from the Norwegian Veterinary Institute, Øivind Øines. He's a senior researcher. Øivind has a background in microbiology and specifically in the field of veterinary medicine with the emphasis on using molecular tools. Through his research, he's been focusing on various parasites detrimental to both humans and animals, so the One Health perspective. And for the last couple of years, he's been part of Hunt En Helse project, which he is going to tell us about.
Thank you, Hannah, for the introduction. Thank you for the organizers for letting me talk about the Hunt One Health project. It is a project that has generated a metagenomic repository and which is very relevant for One Health studies. I hope that my presentation here today will spark an interest among some of you and inspire you to look into what we can offer for your research. Before we talk about the One Health project, it is possible to give some context and the background for the project. Hunt is an ongoing health study of humans led by the NTNU Hunt Center in Levanger. It has been following a population in Trøndelag for a number of years, since 1984, and contain a lot of data and biological samples from these humans. In 2017 to 2019, a sub-project in this initiative, Hunt 4, took place, where 56,000 people were sampled. Many of these are also animal owners. Since Hunt had so much data from these humans, the idea of a One Health project was born and presented a great opportunity to also include sampling of animals and animal data from this population. Some researchers from NMBU, NTNU, and VE, I see many of these people today here, collaborated and initiated the Hunt One Health project. This new Hunt One Health project would collect samples and data from companion and production animals that could be linked with relevant data from the humans. Collaboration from the Hunt team ensured efficient sampling quite soon in the project. And in addition, the data collected was kept in the Hunt umbrella. And it's also important to know about different other data sources that could be linked onto these samples. As most of you know, the health of animals and humans is linked, and the most important influencers of this health are various microorganisms, such as bacteria, fungi, protozoans, and parasites. In addition, there are also other non-living biological entities, such as phages, prions, and viruses. Many of these can be found in the digestive systems of animals, and I think of them as a melting pot of a complex community of organisms which are ingested from and excreted to the environment. Feces are the obvious vehicles of transport of microorganisms between animals and humans. And it's an obvious target for study if we want to know more about this. When sampling, the project decided to focus on dogs, pigs, cattle, sheep, and horse, which all live relatively close to the humans. We sampled 3,000 fecal samples in the years from 2017 to 2019. So what should we do about these samples? Well, the reduced cost of DNA sequencing and further development of metagenomic tools, together with the fact that we had some resources available, was the best idea to then do the DNA sequencing, shotgun sequencing of all these samples. By generating a DNA sequence database, this would create a highly reusable and multi-purpose data set that could be used from different areas of research. Stepping back a bit, I like to think about this metagenomic DNA sequencing methods as sort of a digitalizing method of samples. Extracting DNA, and by decoding all of it by some technological methods, we introduce as few methodological filters as possible and know the most as possible about the sample. And these biases of methods are represented here by this sieve. The generation of a database containing information about all the DNA in the sample would create a highly reusable database, and the value of this data would also increase the more it is used and the more we learn about this. In the Hunt One Health project, the main output is not a hypothesis testing, but it is to provide research groups with data from this repository, and if needed, samples. A number of applications have been arriving already. We will hear more about some of the potential about what sort of data can be used. And we hope this repository can be valuable for hypothesis generation or testing, or just as a resource for method or analysis development. In this slide, I show you how we sampled. We have used fecal cards. It's a very scalable method. It's a simple method, and it also is easy to ship. At the same time, this method would not be optimal for all sort of analysis, and perhaps sample quality and volume is negatively affected. So in order to verify this suitability of sampling, we carried out a few pilot experiments. The first experiment, we verified that usable data was generated from these samples by using a well-known DNA isolation protocol with well-proven sequence library prep and sequence technology. This confirmed that usable amount of data was generated from these fecal samples. Following this, we needed to make sure that the DNA purification protocol was scalable to many thousand samples, and that this process also would introduce as few filters as possible to the data, making sure that even hard-to-reach DNA would be recovered. We ended up selecting a protocol using a fast prep homogenizer and a Kia Symphony DNA extraction robot. So during the pandemic, we have been busy processing samples and shipping them to our sequence vendor. The last datasets were recently returned to us now, and we have completed the upload of this data to the Hunt Cloud. It's quite a few terabytes. We keep both clean data as well as the raw data available to you. So we're just now going through the dataset, doing some QC analysis. I won't go into the depth of this because of time. We try to implement a traffic light system on the datasets. The administration of this data is also very important. So we have a data administration committee process established via web, and it's open for business now. There's also a cost model, and more of this you can find on our web pages. So basically, we would like to be a partner for your One Health research. And if you put your mobile phone up to this QR code, you will arrive at our web pages. Otherwise, just contact us, and thank you for the attention.
So again, we will save the questions for after. And I will introduce Linn Buberg, who is a veterinarian currently working towards her PhD at NMBU and the veterinary faculty under food safety and working on E. coli and yeah, she's going to tell you about it.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. As Carlos told us this morning, One Health is more than antimicrobial resistance, but I still believe that it's very important. So I hope you agree that having active antibiotics that we can use once we have an infection is super important as well. And that's why I've been working on this. So I'll try to make it as fast as I can and still be able to have you following. So because antimicrobial resistance is super important, right? We are lucky in Norway to have surveillance systems to keep track on the development of this resistance. We have it on the human side, that's called NORM, and we have it on the animal side, NORM-VET. NORM-VET is carried out by the Veterinary Institute, and an interesting finding that they did at the beginning of the 2010s was that on retail poultry meat, so chicken fillets in the store, they found an E. coli that was resistant to third-generation cephalosporins. This was a bit surprising because as veterinarians, we don't use this type of antimicrobials for poultry. So we didn't know where it came from, and we didn't know what this had to say for the consumers. So when you go to the store, you could risk getting one of these bad bugs with you back home. And in the case of compromised kitchen hygiene, if you forget to switch your knives in between making the salad and the chicken, then you could end up getting these bacteria into your mouth, for example. And in 2015, the Norwegian Scientific Committee evaluated the risk of these types of bacteria in poultry meat. What this quote basically means is that we can't say it's dangerous, but we cannot say it's safe either. So that, of course, opens for a lot of questions, which is nice if you're trying to get a PhD. We know that we find these bacteria on the poultry meat. We know that consumers get it into their home, but we don't know if they're able to survive being eaten, being digested. We don't know if this process of being eaten changes anything in the bacteria, if they get other characteristics, if they change their genetic material. And we don't know if they are able to spread these resistance genes to, for example, other bacteria in the gut. And to figure this out, of course, there's something we can do about it. I picked out 31 isolates that they collected through NORM-VET. They all have the resistance genes, providing resistance against third-generation cephalosporins. That's a type of beta-lactam antibiotics that I, as a veterinarian, are not allowed to touch. We save that for the human side. And then we try to set them up in artificial digestion. So that's a static in vitro digestion model. We have 3 steps. That's an oral step, a gastric step, and an intestinal step. So we put these bacteria into simulated digestive fluids. We alter the pH and we add digestive enzymes, and then we stress them and try to simulate what's going on when people eat them. In addition to that, we look at their ability to adhere to and invade cells from the gastrointestinal tract to see if they're able to cause disease, for example. And we also look at their ability to spread their genes to other bacteria once this is happening. In addition, we're trying to look at the gene expression and do some genomic analysis to see if they change anything while they're being stressed in this way. And as this is a current work, so of course, I have been able to develop the protocol. We have performed it, wait for it, once. And so this is very, very preliminary data that I'm very happy to share with you today. This graph is basically just the number of bacteria that survived being eaten in my model. So this is just the raw numbers. And as you can see, all 31 of the isolates were able to grow and to live after being digested. It's not super surprising because it's E. coli, and E. coli live in the gut. E. coli is thriving in the gut, but it's important to show that they're actually able to survive this. And then we also have some preliminary data on the conjugation. So the conjugation is when my bad bugs, my bad bacteria, give their DNA providing resistance to another bacteria. And we've done this in the control, that's before digestion, and after digestion, We do it again, and then we see that the bacteria are actually able to produce more transconjugates, so more bacteria that received this genetic material. And this is very preliminary data again, but it shows a trend that maybe this is something that we need to worry about later on. Of course, being quick, this is a very, very brief summary. And I would love to discuss it with you later. If you grab a hold of me, we could have a cup of coffee and we can talk more about it. As in all research, there are some limitations. I've performed this simulated digestion with monocultures. So I've only used one bacteria, and as most of you know, we have a very diverse microbiota in our gut system, so that could probably be something that could have something to say for our results. It's performed in high concentrations, so we don't know the amount of bacteria that comes with the chicken fillet. And it's a static model, so that it would also be more real to simulate it in a natural model, for example, or together with foods. We've been using liquid models for this. So that's something that I would have to look into once I get back to the lab, once I'm finished with conferences. But the conclusion so far is that they're all able to survive this digestion and that they probably are sharing their genetic material pretty freely. Do I believe they have pathogenic potential? The first glance of the genetic material, I think it's less likely, but the resistance part is definitely something that we need to look more into. One of the questions I often get is, do you still eat chicken fillet yourself? And I can happily share with you that I do for now. This can of course change if I discover something else, but then I promise I will let you know. So once I get back to the lab, I have to repeat all of this and make sure that these results that I showed you are actually real. I have to continue digesting the genomic data that I have collected. This is a collaboration that we're doing together with Bjørn Lindstedt at KBM. Look at the gene expression, and maybe we find out if these bacteria are not direct pathogens, maybe they are hybrid pathogens. Maybe they have some characteristics making them a bit scary. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and we'll be happy to discuss with you later.
Thank you. And thank you for sticking to 7 minutes. Very well done. I'd like to introduce Annika Phillips. She's a 5th year veterinary student, and she's following the research track program, which means that she has taken a full year out to do research between year 3 and 4, and then she continues doing research through her studies, and hopefully she'll do a PhD after. Well, she's working on Coxiella, which I am particularly looking forward to listening to. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for the introduction. I just want to say that this is my very first conference, so I'm incredibly humbled and grateful to be here today to talk about our work on the occurrence and impact of Coxiella burnetii in East African cattle, a possible zoonotic threat. So first of all, I just briefly want to start with explaining a bit about Coxiella, which is the causative agent of Q fever. It's a bacteria that is zoonotic, which has its main reservoir in ruminants, where it generally causes reproductive disorders. It has a very long survival rate outside the host, and it can transmit to humans mainly through aerosols, through the consumption of unpasteurized milk, and through contact with placental fluid and birth material from infected animals. It also has a very low infectious dose, and it is believed to be prevalent throughout most of the world. So on a global scale, Coxiella burnetii is a public health concern in quite a lot of countries, with currently the exception of Norway and New Zealand, where it's believed not to be found. And there's been large known outbreaks in Europe in recent years. However, there is limited research and knowledge available on the theme. It is assumed to be endemic throughout Africa. Africa generally quite have large livestock populations, and livestock and humans live quite closely. But there's been no previous research done on Coxiella burnetii in cattle in either Malawi or Tanzania. So our research aim with this project was to invest the occurrence of Coxiella burnetii in cattle in Malawi and Tanzania and the impact of the disease. And we wanted to do that by looking at the occurrence of specific antibodies, both on an individual level and a herd level. We also wanted to look at risk factors associated with seropositivity, and we wanted to see if we could isolate the bacteria from milk from these cows. So field work was done in 2 areas of Tanzania and 1 area in Malawi. And even though this is 2 different countries, as you can see from the map, the study areas are quite close to one another. Both countries have really warm, dry, dusty climate. Animals and humans live very closely, and the consumption of unpasteurized milk is common. So we collected both milk samples and serum samples and epidemiological data on 3 different occasions. The first one was in Tanzania in 2012, and then in Malawi in 2016, and then I joined the field work that was done in Tanzania in 2020. These samples, the milk and serum samples, were then analyzed by using commercially available ELISA kits for specific antibodies. And we also used PCR to detect the antigen in milk from the milk samples. All the samples from Tanzania 2012 and Malawi 2016 were analyzed in Norway at the Norwegian Veterinary Institute. But the samples that were collected in Tanzania in 2020 were actually analyzed at the Sokoine University of Agriculture in Tanzania, where I was also part of establishing the method for PCR to show the Coxiella in PCR. That was never done there before. So our results, as of now, this is an ongoing project, so these are just preliminary results, but they do show detection of Coxiella burnetii specific antibodies in cattle in both Malawi and Tanzania. As you can see, it's a slightly higher prevalence in Malawi, both on an individual level and on herd level, with the exception of those from Tanzania in 2020 on herd level, but that might be due to the fact there was quite few herds sampled at the time. We've also started briefly looking into risk factors for seropositivity. And here you see, this is one of the locations in Tanzania in 2012 that show quite a distinct difference between 2 areas. We've also started looking at breeds, as it's quite common to keep different breeds in Tanzania. So a lot of people keep European breeds, and many keep the indigenous Zebu cattle breed. And as of now, it's suggested that it's a higher occurrence in the Zebu cattle. As for our qPCR results, only 2 out of 39 samples from Malawi proved doubtful or weak positives. Further analysis of these are planned in the Netherlands. And none of the milk samples were PCR positive from Tanzania 2020. And this has been giving us a little bit of a headache as to how to interpret these results. So we want to investigate further if this could be down to our methods. Like I said, it was the first time this was done at that lab, and milk can be a little bit tricky to work with when it comes to PCR. Or if these actually are reliable results, and could there possibly be a short window for antigen shedding, and we were simply at the wrong place at the wrong time, so to speak, with our sampling. But the conclusions we do have as of now is that Coxiella burnetii is indeed present in cattle populations in Malawi and Tanzania. Our preliminary results do show geographical variations between countries and within regions. And there was no PCR detection of the bacteria in milk from Tanzania, but weak indication of the antigen in samples from Malawi. So there's quite a lot of more work to be done on this project, which I'm very excited about, because this is the part that maybe excites me the most. So we're going to look at different risk factors that are associated with seropositivity. And we're wondering if, for example, production type could have something to do with it. If breed could have something to do with it, like I said, with the indigenous Zebu cattle as compared to the European breeds. If contact with wildlife could play into it. Quite a lot of the Zebu cattle is kept as nomadic animals, so they move around quite a lot. They get in contact with a large part of the environment and also wildlife. or if there could be seasonal variation in the sense that both Malawi and Tanzania have very dry seasons and very rainy seasons. So during the dry seasons, we could have an increased risk due to more dust and more particles being moved around. Just to round this all off, I wanted to say that I do believe that the cattle that we've looked at is a reservoir for the disease, which again could be a possible threat to public health and other livestock in these countries. Coxiella Burnetii is often talked about as a neglected zoonotic disease, which I do agree with. And I really do believe that further focus and research on both prevalence and impact is very important from a One Health perspective. And I also just wanted to thank everyone involved and my supervisors for helping me to where I am today. Thank you.
Well done, thank you. You can easily go to more conferences. And it's also proof that you can give a lot of information in a short period of time. Now, I'm wondering, should we go ahead with a panel discussion? Yeah, even though we're running late, yeah? Yeah, okay. So I'm asking everyone to come up. They can sit here. Yeah. I'll invite the audience to ask some questions before I fire loose, then we'll see how much time there's left afterwards. So if anyone has any questions, can you please just put your hand up, and we have a mic here. Carlos has one.
Thank you very much to all of you, and I'll do the two at the same time, so it's easier. But on the Coxiella, more curiosity, of course. What do we know on the human side, if we know anything at all in the area? And to Kristian, Frode is not here anymore, but how do we tackle the fact that you both went into the medical school a few years ago, but those that are going through it today still hear little or nothing about One Health? How do we tackle that issue? Thank you to both.
On the human side, what I've read up on is that it manifests mainly as a like influential type of disease. And like I said, there has been human outbreaks in Europe in recent years. There was a huge one in the Netherlands where transmission came from goats. But not in Malawi or Tanzania. As we know, there's been very little research done on human prevalence in these countries, and it would be immensely exciting to go in and see, especially in these countries where we now have found antibodies, if there is human occurrence there as well. But I know there's been one project done in Gambia where they did find human occurrence. And it's also important that it's often misdiagnosed maybe as malaria, who shows the same kind of symptoms. So.
Yes, when it comes to involving the medical community in the One Health and planetary health issues, I think what I can say is that there are a lot of initiatives going on these days trying to implement education and topics regarding One Health and planetary health in the medical curriculum. But it's really filled up at the moment, and it's difficult when we talk with people in charge of the medical curriculum. It's really difficult to find place for it. But I think, or maybe I don't think, I hope that this COVID-19 situation really has sort of maybe it can be a game changer and show the relevance of thinking in a One Health way, also among medical doctors in Norway. Internationally, I have to say, with my international colleagues, the situation is quite different. So that's only my personal experience in Norway. We are sort of lagging behind a little bit.
Jeanette has a question.
Thank you very much for a very interesting session. I have a question about the hunt data. Yes, you collected feces. Did you do other kind of information? You had 3,000 pets. So what else did you collect?
Yeah, there's a questionnaire that was done of the owners about these animals. The scope of depth of the information, I don't want to go into that, but there's some key information there we can go into. Plus, we have the health registers for livestock we can also dive into later, if that's necessary.
Yeah, and Gro has a question.
It's to Mylin. I was wondering, you said that you were going to do food studies as well with your isolates. Are you going to inoculate foods, run them through the digestive systems, and then see what happens? And how are you planning to do that? I would be very interested to hear.
It's definitely a possibility. I have some limited time, but that's something that we would like to look into. So first we started, the protocol that I'm using is developed by Infogest. I forgot to mention that in the talk. So that's an international network that works on the fate of foods. And this model is basically made for digestion of different amino acids and different foodstuffs. So I'm using a liquid broth while digesting the bacteria, but I could also mince up, for example, chicken fillet, and then inoculate the chicken fillet with a certain amount of bacteria, and then digest this together and see if the presence of the amino acids or the proteins from the chicken fillet would also affect the digestion of the bacteria, if they survive better while being present on chicken compared to other foodstuffs. But to start with, we would like to look at the bacteria themselves and then get some indications. But once we got the protocol running, it's easy to implement other things and compare them together.
So I'll shoot in one question before there's one last question at the back. Will you take the? Yeah, I'm just going to quickly ask Øivind. So if you want to work on on the hunt material or get involved, how do you do it?
Well, for animal samples and animal data, you will approach our group, Hunt One Health Project. But for any projects that also involve humans, you would have a separate application to the Hunt Levanger, because it triggers needs for REC approval and all of this. So this is not part of our One Health project, to keep it more simple. So animals only to us, and human part to Hunt Levanger.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I am Matthias. From Ethiopia and from UIO here. So thank you for the organizer as well as for the presenter. I have one question for Linn. So you did good work, especially in the AMR on the survival of Escherichia coli. So, and you get some results. So my question is, are you stopped by simply giving this amount of, or this persons are resistant? So did you conduct some microbial risk assessment? How many people are at risk by getting or infecting from the consumption of poultry, or you left for the other somebody? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. If I understood you correctly, you are wondering if we're doing some risk assessment afterwards as well, to see how you are wondering if we're doing some risk assessment in addition, right? Because these isolates were found in 2012, 2014, and 2016. But once you start working with something, it suddenly disappeared, and we haven't been able to discover them in 2018 and 2020 yet. We don't know where they came from, and we don't know why they disappeared, so we don't know if they're going to show up again. But currently, the fillet that you buy in the store today would not have this type of resistance on them, most likely. We're not evaluating the risk assessment. Right now, we're just answering the questions if they are able to survive at all, and if they are able to spread. If the answer to all of those questions that I listed earlier is no, they don't survive, and no, they're not able to cause infection, and no, they're not spreading their resistance, then there wouldn't be any use to doing any risk assessment. In my project, there's not room for doing risk assessment per now, but if I get a postdoc, maybe I could look into that.
And that was the official application. I think we'll just have to round it up there, because otherwise Jeanette will have us doing our exercises again. I want everyone to go into the break wondering, why do we not have Coxiella in Norway?